Have you ever considered that the man you think is confusing or impossible to understand might actually be showing his feelings very clearly, just not in the way you expect? The reason many women miss these signs is because men often express attraction differently. They do not always say exactly how they feel. Instead, their behavior quietly reveals it. When a man genuinely likes you, his mind starts working in ways he doesn't even notice. Today, you'll discover 7 psychological patterns that often appear when a man is truly interested. Once you recognize these behaviors, you'll begin seeing attraction from a completely different perspective and stop second-guessing the signals. But before we continue, think about this for a moment. Have you ever known a man who seemed inconsistent, yet somehow always stayed connected to your life? Maybe he disappeared for a while, but never completely left your world. If that sounds familiar, leave a comment because what you're about to learn may explain exactly why that happens. The first pattern is that he begins overthinking nearly everything around you. When a man truly likes someone, his mind rarely stays relaxed. Instead of simply talking, he starts editing himself while the conversation is happening. He wonders whether his joke was funny enough, whether he sounded too interested, whether he should send a message now or wait until later. This is not confusion, it is emotional investment. When someone means very little, there is nothing to analyze. But when someone becomes emotionally important, every interaction suddenly feels meaningful. The second pattern is that he becomes more consistent than he usually is. Not perfect, not overwhelming, just noticeably more reliable. He replies a little faster, checks in more often, and naturally looks for small reasons to stay connected. That is because consistency is often attraction trying to become something stable. A man with no real interest disappears without much thought. A man who truly cares naturally finds reasons to come back. Stay with me because the next signs are even easier to miss, and they reveal far more than words ever could. The third pattern is that he remembers small details you probably forgot you even shared. You casually mention your favorite coffee, your favorite movie, or something that happened during your week, and much later he remembers it without being reminded. He isn't trying to impress you by memorizing information. His attention naturally focuses on you because emotional interest changes what the brain considers important. That is why small details stay with him. The fourth pattern is that he begins finding simple excuses to remain in your space. Suddenly, he is replying to conversations that did not really need a response. He comments on things he could have ignored. He finds harmless reasons to keep the conversation going. This does not always happen because he consciously plans it. It often happens because being close to someone you care about simply feels good. A man does not always say, "I miss you." Sometimes he quietly creates opportunities to stay connected instead. The fifth pattern is that he slowly begins testing emotional safety. He may share something a little more personal than usual or reveal a part of himself he normally keeps private. He is not doing this to manipulate you. He is trying to discover whether it feels safe to be genuine around you. If he receives understanding instead of judgment, he gradually becomes more emotionally open over time. If this is helping you understand male behavior more clearly, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people learn how attraction really works and avoid unnecessary confusion in relationships. But don't go anywhere because the next 2 signs are the ones that are misunderstood most often. The sixth pattern is that he becomes quietly protective of your attention. This is usually subtle rather than obvious. He notices when someone else has your focus. He becomes aware when conversations pull you away. Sometimes he naturally tries to bring your attention back without even realizing he is doing it. This is not necessarily about control. It is often about emotional awareness. When someone matters, their attention begins to matter too. The seventh pattern is that he starts appearing in your life in ways that seem completely natural. You may notice him reacting to your stories, responding to your messages, remembering something you mentioned weeks ago, or finding simple reasons to start conversations. It may feel like perfect timing, but in many cases it is simply genuine interest creating opportunities for connection. When a man truly likes someone, he does not always schedule contact. He naturally creates chances for it. One of the biggest internal changes that happens when attraction becomes real is not greater confidence, but greater self-awareness. On the outside, he may still appear relaxed, playful, and easygoing, yet inside his mind becomes much more active whenever you are around. He starts thinking about things he would normally never question. He begins wondering how his words sound, how his actions are being interpreted, and whether he is making the right impression. In everyday life, people usually speak without much thought. They joke naturally, react without planning, and move through conversations on instinct. But when someone becomes emotionally important, that automatic behavior changes. He begins watching himself while the conversation is still happening. He may pause before sending a message, rewrite text several times, or spend extra time deciding how to respond. Even choosing an emoji or deciding whether to send another message can suddenly feel like a meaningful decision. These small behaviors may look insignificant on the surface, but together they reveal a mind that has become emotionally invested long before the words "I like you" are ever spoken. This is not ordinary insecurity. It is emotional investment creating extra caution. One of the most interesting effects of this is how it changes his natural spontaneity. A man who has little emotional interest usually speaks freely, acts without much filtering, and rarely worries about how he comes across. But when his feelings become real, he starts measuring his words more carefully. He may want to impress you in small ways, only to wonder afterward if he tried too hard. He may think about giving you a compliment, decide to hold back, and then regret saying so. This quiet back and forth often happens entirely inside his mind, even if you never notice it. The important thing to understand is that this is usually not about manipulation or playing games. He is not carefully trying to control your opinion of him. Instead, attraction naturally increases self-awareness. The more he values what you think, the more attention his mind gives to how he is being received. That heightened awareness naturally leads to overthinking. He becomes slightly more self-conscious because your opinion now carries emotional weight. You may even notice this through small changes in his body language. He adjusts his posture when you look at him. He becomes more aware of his voice, his eye contact, or even the way he smiles. Sometimes he laughs a little longer than usual and later wonders if it felt natural. These are tiny adjustments driven by the desire to create a genuine connection rather than to appear perfect. Ironically, the more he overthinks around you, the more it often reveals that his interest is sincere. People rarely monitor themselves so closely around someone they feel nothing for. Emotional distance creates comfort. Emotional importance creates awareness. So when you notice a man becoming slightly more thoughtful or careful around you, you are often seeing not uncertainty about you, but the quiet effect of how much you matter to him. Stay with me, because the next sign is one of the strongest indicators of genuine attraction, yet it is also one of the easiest to misunderstand. When a man truly likes you, one of the clearest changes is not dramatic romance, but a gradual shift in consistency. He does not suddenly become a different person or completely rearrange his life overnight. Instead, the direction of his efforts slowly changes. His attention begins returning to you more naturally, more often, and with less resistance than before. This usually does not appear through grand gestures or constant messages. It shows itself through a quiet pattern of reliability that feels intentional rather than random. Most people are naturally inconsistent because everyday life divides their attention between work, family, responsibilities, hobbies, and personal goals. When someone is not emotionally invested, their communication often reflects that reality. They reply when it is convenient, start conversations when they are bored, and disappear without giving it much thought. But once genuine attraction develops, your place in his mind becomes more stable. As a result, he naturally checks in more often, responds with greater consistency, and returns to conversations instead of letting them fade away. He may not text throughout the entire day, but he usually comes back. He may not always message first, but he rarely leaves long periods of silence without reconnecting. Even during busy times, there is a noticeable pattern of returning. That habit of coming back is one of the strongest signs of emotional interest interest because it shows that you continue occupying space in his thoughts. You are no longer just another passing interaction. You become someone his attention repeatedly circles back toward, even when life pulls him in different directions. What makes this even more meaningful is that it usually happens without conscious effort. A man rarely decides, from today, I will be more consistent. Instead, consistency becomes a natural result of emotional importance. When someone truly matters, forgetting them feels unusual. Ignoring them requires more effort than reaching out. Even while handling other responsibilities, there is often a quiet pull that brings his attention back to you. That is why he may respond to your stories later, return to conversations he missed, or check in after a period of silence. This is not perfection, it is persistence. During the early stages, that consistency rarely looks overwhelming. It usually feels balanced. He remains present without becoming excessive. His attraction gradually becomes part of his normal routine instead of replacing it. Another important difference is emotional consistency, not just regular communication. He stays interested in your thoughts, remembers earlier conversations, asks follow-up questions, and continues topics that were discussed days or even weeks before. This creates a sense of continuity. People with little emotional interest often treat every conversation as completely separate. But when a man genuinely likes you, his mind quietly builds a story. He remembers the details, connects past conversations to present ones, and naturally develops that relationship. At the same time, emotional distance should not always be mistaken for a lack of interest. Sometimes he steps back because he is cautious, uncertain, or simply managing other responsibilities. The real difference is what happens afterwards. Someone who is not interested usually fades away without returning. Someone who genuinely cares may become temporarily quiet, but eventually comes back to the same level of interest. That pattern of returning reveals more than constant availability ever could. One of the strongest signs of attraction appears in the small details he remembers about you. A casual comment about your favorite coffee, a childhood memory, a place you want to visit, or something you mentioned only once suddenly appears again in a later conversation. He is not forcing himself to remember these things. Attraction naturally changes what a man considers important. Information connected to someone emotionally significant becomes easier to store and recall. He may forget many ordinary things from the same day, yet remember something simple you shared weeks ago. He also connects conversations instead of treating each one as separate. He remembers what you said before, asks about it later, and builds on previous discussions. These moments show that he is not simply listening to reply. He is listening because your words carry lasting value in his mind, and that quiet attention often says far more than any direct confession ever could. That kind of continuity is rarely accidental. It reflects steady attention over time. Another quiet sign appears when he uses those remembered details to create thoughtful moments without making a big deal out of them. He may suggest visiting a place you once mentioned, remember your favorite drink, or avoid something you previously said you disliked. These are not dramatic gestures, but they carry emotional meaning because they show that your words stayed with him. They create the feeling that he was not simply listening in the moment, he was genuinely paying attention. What makes this even more interesting is that he often does not realize how much he remembers. If you asked him directly, he might struggle to explain why he knows so many small things about you. That is because this is not careful studying or deliberate memorization. It is emotional filtering. The brain naturally gives more importance to information connected with curiosity, enjoyment, and emotional interest. The more he enjoys being around you, the more naturally your details stay in his memory. Over time, this creates a quiet cycle. The more he remembers, the more familiar you become. The more familiar you become, the more attention he gives to new details. Without realizing it, his emotional connection keeps growing through repeated moments of attention. Of course, remembering one or two details alone is not enough to prove attraction. Anyone can occasionally recall something. What truly matters is the pattern. When he consistently remembers little things across different conversations, it shows ongoing mental engagement. It means you are no longer just part of one conversation. You have become part of an ongoing story in his mind. That is why remembering small details is one of the quietest yet strongest signs of genuine interest. It does not demand attention or create drama. It simply shows that you continue existing in his thoughts long after the conversation has ended. Stay with me, because the next pattern explains why a man who genuinely likes you often seems to appear wherever your world naturally overlaps with his. When a man truly likes you, one of the easiest behaviors to misunderstand is his tendency to find reasons to stay within your space, even when there is no obvious need to do so. This usually does not appear through grand romantic gestures or constant attention. Instead, it develops through small patterns where he stays emotionally or physically closer than the situation requires. It may simply seem like he is around more often, but underneath that is a natural psychological pull toward closeness. In everyday life, people usually invest their time where they find value and enjoyment. If someone feels emotionally neutral, they interact when necessary and move on without much thought. But when attraction develops, that changes. A man often begins stretching ordinary moments. Conversations last a little longer. Messages continue instead of ending quickly. He reacts to things he might normally ignore or starts conversations that did not really need to happen. Most of the time, he is not consciously planning these actions. They feel completely natural to him. He may even tell himself he is simply being friendly, yet his behavior quietly reveals something more. Your presence has become rewarding enough that ending the interaction feels less satisfying than keeping it going. A brief message turns into a longer conversation. A casual greeting becomes a meaningful exchange. A simple interaction slowly becomes part of an ongoing connection. You may also notice that he naturally appears in places connected to your life. He becomes more active in shared spaces, pays attention to the things you enjoy, or joins conversations where he knows you are likely to be. This is rarely about strategy or control. It is about familiarity. When someone matters emotionally, the mind naturally looks for more opportunities to experience that connection. Being close creates comfort, and that comfort strengthens attraction even further. Another interesting part of this behavior is timing. He may not always reach out at the most convenient moment, but he often appears when the interaction feels emotionally meaningful. He might respond after you share something personal, check in when you seem quieter than usual, or reconnect after a period of silence. These moments are not always carefully planned. They often reflect an increased awareness of what is happening in your life and a quiet desire to remain connected. He may also create gentle opportunities for conversation by asking follow-up questions, bringing back earlier topics, or sharing small things that invite a response without demanding one. These are not attempts to fill empty space. They are simple ways of keeping the connection alive. It is also important to remember that staying in your space does not always mean physical closeness. Today, emotional and digital presence can be just as meaningful. Reacting to your updates, remembering to check in, staying engaged with your life, or quietly paying attention even during periods of silence are all forms of emotional proximity. Because these behaviors are usually subtle, they are often mistaken for coincidence or simple friendliness. The difference is repetition. One isolated interaction means very little, but someone who repeatedly finds reasons to return when there is no obligation is showing emotional preference rather than convenience. In the end, staying close becomes less about logic and more about emotional gravity. He continues returning because your presence feels comforting, interesting, and meaningful in ways he may not fully recognize himself. One of the most revealing patterns appears when he begins testing emotional safety without realizing it. This rarely happens through dramatic confessions or major emotional conversations. Instead, it begins through small moments where he shares something slightly more personal and quietly watches how you respond. He is not trying to manipulate the situation. He is simply discovering whether it feels safe to be more genuine with you. Most people naturally stay within comfortable emotional limits. They discuss everyday topics, keep conversations light, and avoid exposing the parts of themselves that feel vulnerable. But attraction gradually changes those limits. As you become emotionally important, your reaction begins carrying greater significance. That often encourages him to step outside his usual comfort zone, even if only a little. He may casually mention a personal experience, share an opinion he usually keeps private, or reveal something honest that he would not normally discuss with someone he barely knows. Those small moments often say much more than they appear to on the surface because they quietly reveal that trust is beginning to grow alongside attraction. These moments are rarely dramatic or emotional confessions. Instead, they are quiet moments of honesty. They are not carefully planned, but they are guided by genuine feelings. Without even realizing it, he is asking himself, what happens if I show a more honest side of myself here? What he pays attention to is not only what you say, but also how you respond emotionally. Does the conversation remain comfortable? Do you seem accepting or distant? Do you respond with warmth, or do you quickly change the subject? Those reactions matter far more than the topic itself because he is not really testing information. He is trying to understand whether the emotional space between you feels safe. You may notice that after these small moments of openness, he either becomes gradually more comfortable or pulls back for a while. That is where the quiet testing becomes visible. If he feels accepted, his confidence grows. He begins connecting your presence with comfort instead of emotional risk. But if he feels misunderstood or judged, he may return to being more reserved. Another important part of this process is how natural it looks. He is not openly announcing that he is testing emotional safety. Instead, it happens through stories, honest opinions, or slightly deeper questions. He may ask how you deal with challenges, what you think about meaningful experiences, or how you usually respond in emotional situations. The purpose is not simply to hear your answer, it is to understand how safe it feels to share more of himself with you. Emotional safety is built little by little, not in one conversation, but through many positive experiences. Every time he feels understood instead of criticized, trust quietly grows. Over time, that trust allows him to relax and show more of his real personality without constantly second-guessing himself. At the same time, this process is not always perfectly steady. One day he may seem very open, while the next day he becomes quieter. That does not automatically mean his feelings have changed. Often, it simply means he is adjusting based on how secure he felt during earlier conversations. If he is uncertain, he moves carefully instead of rushing emotionally. This gradual approach often comes before much deeper emotional attachment because before investing fully, he wants to know he can be himself without feeling misunderstood. Stay with me because the next pattern explains one of the strongest signs of attraction that many people completely overlook. When a man genuinely likes you, one of the clearest but least noticed changes is how much attention he gives to your attention. He no longer notices only you. He starts noticing what captures your focus, where your energy goes, and whether he is still part of your thoughts. This is not usually about insecurity or wanting control. It is about emotional importance. When someone becomes meaningful, their attention naturally becomes meaningful too. During ordinary interactions, people rarely think about where another person's attention is going. If there is no emotional investment, it makes little difference who they are talking to or what they are focusing on. But when attraction grows, something changes. Your attention begins to feel valuable. That is when subtle protective behaviors often appear. You might notice him becoming more engaging whenever your focus starts drifting during a conversation. He may tell another story, make another joke, or naturally guide the conversation back towards something you both enjoy. He is not consciously competing for your attention. He simply enjoys feeling connected, and losing that connection feels noticeable. Another quiet sign appears when someone else has your attention. This does not always show itself as jealousy. More often, it appears through small shifts in his behavior. He may become quieter, observe more carefully, or later make an effort to reconnect with you. Inside, he notices that your attention has moved elsewhere and that awareness quietly influences what he does next. What drives this is not possession, it is emotional priority. Once someone becomes important, their attention becomes a signal of connection. When that attention moves away, even briefly, he naturally feels the desire to rebuild that connection. That is why he may return with another question, another topic, or another reason to continue the interaction without making it feel forced. He also becomes more aware of how engaged you seem while talking with him. He notices your energy, your curiosity, your enthusiasm, and whether you seem emotionally present. If your responses become shorter or more distant, he often adjusts without saying anything. He may become funnier, more expressive, or more thoughtful, not because he planned a strategy, but because he instinctively wants to strengthen the connection. Your attention becomes an emotional signal. When that signal grows weaker, he naturally responds by trying to bring it back. This does not mean he wants to control who you talk to or expects your complete focus all the time. It simply shows that your attention has become emotionally meaningful to him. Someone with little interest rarely notices where your attention goes. Someone who genuinely cares notices it almost automatically. Over time, your engagement becomes something he quietly values, because it represents closeness and connection rather than simple conversation. The most important thing to remember is this: these psychological patterns are not games designed to confuse you. They are often quiet signals that genuine attraction is developing beneath the surface. At the same time, the real goal is not to analyze every smile, every message, or every small behavior. Instead, ask yourself one simple question: does this connection give me peace of mind, or does it leave me constantly confused? Healthy attraction should create increasing clarity rather than endless uncertainty. When someone truly values you, you should not have to spend every day searching for hidden meanings. Their actions naturally begin creating confidence over time. That does not mean they will always be perfect, but their interest becomes easier to recognize through consistency, attention, and emotional presence. When you experience that kind of connection, you stop chasing signs because you no longer need them. The certainty begins speaking for itself. If this helped you understand relationships in a new way, take a moment to share it with someone who could benefit from hearing it.